Please settle in now, good people. Our service is about to begin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the South Jersey Shore, a welcoming and inclusive community. We'd like to welcome any guests we have today. Thank you for taking a chance and joining us for worship. My name is Paul Utz, and I will be your worship associate this morning. I'm a member of this congregation, a charter member, and have been since the very beginning. I'm still involved with the finance committee and the choir, sort of remotely, and a few other things along the way whenever I'm needed. Our worship service today is led by our guest speaker, our very own Michael Cluff. Michael and his family have been members of UUC SGS for 15 years, and he's spoken on many topics. He's also a former co-host of Secular Nation podcast and is a current president of the South Jersey Humanists. Video of today's service will be available on our website and Facebook page later today. If you care to tweet during today's service, you can use the hashtag UUCSJS. If you are joining us from a computer or a smartphone, you're encouraged to type any joys or concerns in the chat box area of your screen. We'd appreciate if you do this before joys and concerns instead of during, so that we can get the messages to you clearly. In most platforms, it can be accessed by the chat icon at either the top or the bottom of the page. And the chat section will open where you can leave a comment and see what others have said. Please remember that this video will be on the internet, so don't share anything you don't want the world to know. Welcome to worship.
Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. So walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. So walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. We're gonna walk, yes, we're gonna walk. We're gonna talk, yes, we're gonna talk. We're gonna shout, yes, we're gonna shout. We're gonna sing, yes, we're gonna sing. We're gonna walk, we're gonna talk. We're gonna shout, we're gonna sing. We're gonna sing, walk, talk, shout, sing hallelujah to Jesus our King. We're gonna walk, yes, we're gonna walk. We're gonna talk, yes, we're gonna talk. We're gonna shout, yes, we're gonna shout. We're gonna sing, yes, we're gonna sing. We're gonna walk, we're gonna talk. We're gonna shout, we're gonna sing. Walk, talk, shout, sing hallelujah to Jesus our King. There's a great camp meeting. A great camp meeting. A great camp meeting in the promised land. Walk together, children.
Welcome into this place of healing. Welcome into this place of challenge and of growth. Welcome into this place of imperfection and aspiration. You are whole in your brokenness. You are holy in your shame. You are wholly loved as you are. You know, I looked around lately and I asked, why isn't somebody doing something? And then I realized I am somebody. We light this chalice this morning in thanks, and in many cases, in memory of those somebodies who have worked towards racial justice. And in thanks for those somebodies still to come who continue to do the work for a more fair and peaceful world. Please join in singing along from where you are, our gathering hymn, One More Step.
One more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more prayer, we will say one more prayer, till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song, we will sing one more song, till every song is sung by everyone. We'll sing one more song.
Good morning, everyone. This morning, I want to tell you a little bit about an organization called the Yoga and Social Justice Collaborative. So this organization explores the relationship between spiritual practice of yoga and social justice. Now, when I heard that Michael was leading a service called Bending Ourselves Toward Justice, I thought it would be a wonderful time to explore the idea of yoga and social justice with you all. So later on, Michael will be telling you all about the ways you can lean in, get out of your own way, and even find some comfort in being uncomfortable in the fight for justice and equity. But what I want to share with you this morning is a way to be present and grounded in your body, while also opening your heart and leaning on your intuition. Now, some of you may not have ever tried yoga before or even really spent any time thinking about it. And especially not what it has to do with social justice. And you know what? I get it. In America, yoga has become a weight loss exercise trend for thin, white suburban women. There are studio classes to attend, yoga mats to buy, fancy designer clothes to wear. Yoga, my friends, has been colonized. But there are two things I want to share with you about yoga that will show you how to practice yoga in a more restorative way. If you look on the internet, you'll see beautiful skinny women wearing bikinis, twisting themselves into fantastic shapes on exotic beaches. But you see, yoga was never meant to be that. It's fallen victim to cultural appropriation. Yoga was developed as a spiritual practice. You can't win at yoga. It isn't a challenge or a contest. It's a practice. By learning more about what yoga was meant to be and by practicing it in an authentic way, a non-appropriative way, we can help to decolonize this spiritual practice that was intended to be shared with the world in order to transform the human spirit. So that's the first thing. Number two, yoga is an incredible spiritual practice for you to add to your bag. It's the ultimate tool for self-care. The meditation, breathwork, and asanas or physical postures are self-soothing. They can serve to heal the mind, body, and the soul. Being present in our minds and in our bodies can change the ways in which we move through the world and how we interact with others. As social justice warriors, you must take care of yourselves. You can't pour from an empty cup. The fight for racial justice in this country has been described as a marathon and not a sprint. It will be hard both mentally and physically, and you'll need to take care of yourselves in order to care for others. In the words of poet and activist Audre Lorde, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Today, I'm going to share a few yoga poses with you that you can use to help be present and to take care of yourselves. If you've never done yoga before, you feel self-conscious, those of you in your pajamas right now, know that no one is judging you, but feel free to turn off your video camera if that makes you feel more comfortable. If you're sitting there thinking you don't like yoga or it's silly to do exercise during our worship service, I ask that you just try it. Just try. Don't judge it as silly or something you'll never use. Take a few minutes this morning and have a little faith. Please know that I am not a certified yoga instructor. I've been practicing yoga for almost 20 years, but I've progressed maybe to advanced beginner. I told you it's not a contest, it's a practice. Yoga can help us find that edge between comfort and uncomfortable. When we find that spot, we can stay there. That's where growth happens, in that spot where it starts to be uncomfortable. What I'm going to share with you this morning is your introduction to the possibilities of what yoga can do for you as a spiritual practice and as part of social justice movements. We will be bending ourselves, but not into pretzels, so don't worry about that. If you're able, please stand and find some space in the room where you are. Max is here to help demonstrate how you can do some of these asanas while sitting, if doing the standing poses isn't something you feel you can manage. And if chair yoga isn't something that you can do, I'll be describing the poses, so maybe you can close your eyes and do a visualization if that's something that can work for you. Give me 1 second. And Watson is here to help us as well. So the first thing I want you to do if you're standing is to stand with your feet about hip width apart. And I want you to really spread your toes out so you can feel the ground. If you're sitting, you're going to scoot forward on the chair, plant your feet as firmly as possible on the ground. If you're wearing shoes, take them off so you can feel the ground. You can feel that connection between your body and the earth. We're going to start with mountain pose. So visualize yourself being a mountain. Okay? You're going to put your arms down and feel the strength in your arms, in your legs, in your body. If you're standing, tuck your tailbone under, and everyone take your heart center and lift it to the sky. We're opening our hearts, and we're feeling strength in our mountain pose. Now I want you to take a deep breath in and lift your ears, your shoulders all the way up to your ears, and then let it go. Feel what that feels like. Take the deepest breath you've taken all day and let it out. Now imagine you're holding a beach ball, and I want you to bring that beach ball over in front of you. And now this may be a silly thing to think of, a mountain holding a beach ball. But everything doesn't have to be so hard, and it doesn't have to be so serious. So we're going to take that beach ball and we're going to lift it. And I want you to lift it as high up as is comfortable for you. Remember, we're trying to find that spot of discomfort. And when you get it, whether it's here or all the way up over your head, I want you to find where it's just a little bit uncomfortable and stay there. Because remember I said that's where our growth is going to happen. I want you to take your shoulders and drop them down and hold that beach ball wherever you find that spot of growth. We're going to take a deep breath in. And then we're going to tilt our beach ball over to the left. You want to go as far as you can to find that spot. If you're standing, you might have a tendency to sort of put your hips out. I want you to keep them right in line with your legs. And everyone, whether you're sitting or standing, take your heart and tilt it up again. You might want to look up at your top hand if that's comfortable for you. Then I want you to take a deep breath in and bring that beach ball back to the center. We're going to do the same on the other side. Take a deep breath in and tilt over to the other side. Remembering to keep our hearts open and tilting our heads if that's comfortable. We're going to take a deep breath in Return back to center. You should feel a little heat in your arms, especially pulling them up over your head is not something you do on a normal everyday basis. Now we're gonna take that beach ball and we're gonna slowly put it down on the ground. So whether you're standing or sitting, we're gonna start to slowly lower the ball. When you get about halfway, I want you to stop and I want you to really stretch that ball out, pretending you're handing it to someone that's standing just in front of you. Take a deep breath in here, and on the breath out, lower it all the way to the ground. Now, touching the ground may not be something you can do, so I want you to bend your legs and get comfortable here. Find that stretch. Okay, let your head dangle down, let your arms dangle down. It should feel really good in your back and in your legs. We're gonna take a deep breath here. And on the breath out, I want you to roll up as slowly as you can. I want you to drop your shoulders back down and go back into that mountain pose. Okay, find your strength. Find that solid grounding in your feet and in your body. Remember to tuck your tailbone under and lift your heart back up. Now the next one we're gonna do as social justice warriors, we're gonna do a warrior pose, okay? So if you're standing, I want you to take your legs and spread them as far out as you can. This is comfortable for you. Okay, and then I want you to take your left foot and you're gonna turn it all the way to the side, okay? If you're sitting in the chair, you're gonna take your left leg and extend it, and I want you to flex your foot all the way up, pointing up towards the sky, okay? You can put your right hand on your leg for support. You're gonna extend your left arm out over your toes. Those of us who are standing, we're gonna extend both of our arms out, okay? You're standing, I want you to bend that front leg so it comes in line over your foot, okay? Everyone, you're gonna look over, whether you're sitting or standing, look over your front left arm, and I want you to lean out over that foot, over your left foot. Remember to keep your heart open. We are social justice warriors, and this is our warrior pose. We're gonna take a deep breath in here, and breathe out, return to center. We're gonna do the same on the other side. So if you're standing, you're gonna take your right leg and point that out. If you're sitting, you're gonna extend your right leg, flex your foot up toward the sky, and switch arms. Okay, so we're going to bend, keeping our knee over our foot, and we're going to reach. Breathe in here, and breathe out, go back to center. Okay, if you're standing, you can come back into mountain pose. If you're sitting, return to your stance. We're gonna take a deep breath in here, and breathe out. Hopefully you've been able to find a little bit of comfort in the discomfort that we're creating, and that you've been able to think of yoga as more than just exercise. Namaste.
Well, that was wonderful, Jess. Thank you so much. Okay, during this next musical interlude, we invite you to write your joys and concerns in the chat portion of your Zoom screen. The icon will be either on the top or the bottom of your screen, and will allow you to enter text into the panel where others can see it. At the end of the musical interlude, I will read what you would share with the congregation gathered here today. Please remember that a recording of today's service will be available on the internet. So once again, don't share something that you don't want the world to know. And please try to write it during the musical interlude so we have time to share what's on your mind. Separated as we are by distance, we are joined this morning in spirit, brought together to seek comfort and encouragement, and to share those things in our lives that bring us joy or cause us sorrow. I will now read aloud for all listening what you would share. Marty writes, and this part always reminds me of Romper Room for those of you that are old enough, good, to read out to the good doobies and bad doobies. Listening to the virtual funeral of Republican John Lewis this week gave me hope that we might be getting this country back soon. Amen. From Karen, thanks to Jack M. and Richard S. for taking care of the building and grounds this summer, and to Jeff, Taylor, and Don for overseeing some of the building repairs and improvement projects. And I echo that. Thank you so much, all of you, for helping take care of our structure while we wait to get back. Cece says, great yoga presentation, Jesse. Namaste. There are others that recommend that echo that sentiment. Damon says, thank you. Julie says, yoga joy. Thank you, Jess. And Gail writes, hey, I just did yoga for the first time. Thanks, Jess. That's awesome, Gail. Tracy writes, my joy was swimming in the Miller's Pool this past week. A tour of the garden and fellowship were uplifting. Katy writes, feel a great sense of calm after that yoga. Thank you, Jess, and thank you for recording your music, Katy. Barbara writes, great job, Jess and Max. Put some hearts in there to boot. Damon also says, joy for seeing Teresa and some much needed healing this week. Richard writes, thank you, Max and Jess. Good way to start every service. Get the blood and spirit flowing. Yeah, I concur with that. It was really nice. Kit, grateful for ice cream and wild berries. It is that time of year. Okay, we now take a moment to say a prayer. Let us be in the spirit of prayer. Blessed and holy creation, universe of wonder, mystery beyond definition. We share today our joys and sorrows, longing for a time when we can once more place stones in the water and in the light of our chalice. Our hearts are touched by this shared ritual, and we are connected. As we do each week, we pray, dear God, for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We keep in our hearts those who are apart from us, whether by distance, time, or conflict unresolved. We keep in our thoughts those who thirst, whether for water, dignity, or justice. We pray for our small, blue, fragile planet. We offer all of these and those joys and concerns that remain unspoken in our hearts into the care of the universe. May our joys be multiplied and our sorrows diminished in this sharing. Amen.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.
Karen, you're muted.
Thank you. We will now take a moment to give and receive the morning offering. that looks and feels a little different when we're separated by distance. Rather than placing a check or cash in the basket, I ask you to consider a generosity practice of sending a check to our P.O. box or arranging a regular payment be sent through your bank. You can also use the donate button on our website to make a contribution. Each Unitarian Universalist congregation is self-supporting. Your financial support is essential since 80% of our income to support all that we do comes from contributions of our members and friends. We hope you'll make a contribution at whatever level you feel comfortable, and remind you that no matter how those gifts are offered, they are always most gratefully received.
This morning's reading is from Letter from Birmingham Jail from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., slightly edited. I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the great stumbling block is not the white citizens counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection.
Good morning, everyone. I am going to try to do this in multimedia mode here, so please bear with me. Paul, if you could nod if you see the splash screen perfectly. All right. So it might help also, everyone, to make sure that your Zoom app is in speaker mode so you can see me and the graphic. Unless you just want to see the graphic, I don't blame you. I promise this won't be death by PowerPoint. First of all, I wanted to thank Jess for making us all uncomfortable. Or wait, that's not what I meant. For making us feel more comfortable with being uncomfortable this morning. So it makes me feel really old to say this, but last year was the 30th anniversary of the release of Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. It's a movie that shook me up when I saw it on my 24th birthday, so you can do the math. I'd just moved to a new city, so I figured I'd treat myself. Drove by myself to the, I didn't know anybody, and so I just went to the movie theater and to see this movie I'd heard so much about. The ending shook me up so much that I wound up taking the New York Thruway going east instead of west, and I got seriously lost without enough toll money to get home. So that was a saga. So a warning, I'm going to describe the ending of Do the Right Thing. So spoiler alert, but you've had 30 years to see it, so come on. Besides, the movie is about far more than its plot. So I really recommend seeing it, even if you know how it ends, okay? This is relevant even today. You'll see why. The movie takes place on a single very hot day in a mostly black neighborhood in Brooklyn. Much of the action centers around Sal's Pizzeria, a family business run by Danny Aiello, and where Spike Lee's character works doing delivery. It's so hot that everyone's temper is at a boiling point. A couple of customers decide to boycott Sal's Pizzeria because of its wall of fame that only features Italian and Italian-American icons. Why aren't there any black people on the wall, they demand. One of the protesters, Radio Raheem, turns up his boombox, blasting Fight the Power. Sal doesn't budge, and there's a loud and angry confrontation. The police arrive and use a chokehold on Radio Raheem, killing him. Back then, this reminded people of Michael Stewart. It has obvious parallels today, from Stewart to Eric Garner to George Floyd. And now the neighborhood is a powder keg waiting to go off. So Spike Lee's character breaks the tension by doing this. This sparks a riot which destroys Sal's Pizzeria. I won't describe the very coda of the movie, but you have to see it for yourself. When the movie was released in 1989, some critics reacted negatively. They expressed shock and despair at how public employees could snuff out a young black man's life simply for getting into an argument at a what am I kidding? They weren't upset about that. No, they were horrified at the loss of the pizzeria. Roger Ebert, who praised the film, said that at his critics screening, I sat behind a woman at the press conference who was convinced the film would cause race riots. Some critics agreed. David Denby of New York Magazine said, if some audiences go wild, Lee is partly responsible. Lee wants to rouse people, to wake them up, but to do what? Jack Kroll of Newsweek said, this movie is dynamite under every seat. Apparently, to these critics, black audiences were too out of control to respond to the movie without resorting to violence. Today, when people ask Spike Lee if his character did the right thing by throwing the trash can through Sal's window, Lee responds, not one person of color has ever asked me that question. As far as I could tell, the only riot this movie sparked was the one it set off in my brain. I expected social conservatives to have this reaction, but liberals, progressives? Martin Luther King famously said, the arc of the universe is long and bends toward justice. But his letter from Birmingham jail reminds us that sometimes you have to do the bending. And even then, your allies will resist you. I've noticed something over the years. When people, mainly white people, quote Martin Luther King, they usually borrow from his I Have a Dream speech or some of his statements about nonviolence, but they rarely quote Letter from Birmingham Jail. But his warnings about resistance to the cause of justice revealed something important. Decades later, we still see a lot of this kind of resistance, where well-meaning people push back against trans rights, take issue with the phrase Black Lives Matter, or maintain that Me Too has gone too far. And it means taking an uncomfortable look at myself. How have I responded badly when confronted with a possibility that I was contributing to oppression? So how do we make ourselves ineffective in the struggle for justice? And even though my ego would love to exclude myself, when I say we, I mean me. I'm not interested in lecturing. I'm interested in deflating the bubble we all live in. So how's that for a light and easy breezy summer service? before we begin here then, let's have a picture of 2 of my cats for a palate cleanser. That's our 2 new kitties. So how is it possible to want to end injustice, but somehow resist ending injustice at the same time? I recently thought of a comic book character, and by recently I mean yesterday, who's dedicated to the cause of justice, but he's really, really bad at it. So bad, he doesn't even know how bad he is. During the day, he's a mild-mannered, middle-class middle manager named Dunning-Kruger. But when he sees injustice anywhere, he turns into the status quo warrior. You've heard of the social justice warrior. Well, this is the status quo warrior. He fights injustice and preserves the status quo. Here's one of his most recent exploits. After the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, status quo warrior sees protesters on the news. It reminds him that there's injustice in the world. Like everyone, this injustice makes him feel sad and a little hopeless. He tries to activate his bubble of denial, but it's been punctured. His rose-colored spectacles no longer work. He sees that some of the protesters have defaced a statue of one of his heroes. He springs into action. He activates his shield of defensiveness. You protesters are doing it wrong, he tells them. You're doing it wrong is his catchphrase. His enemies are powerless against it. He sees a protester sign. His bubble of denial works again. Bravely, he tells the protester, well, actually, all lives matter. He flies away, content that he's helped protesters become more effective. The status quo is preserved. Unbeknownst to him, his nemesis, a social justice warrior, has other ideas and taunts him with this billboard. Actually, when we oppress and attack you, we have a certain way we'd like you to react. LOL, okay. He reads the billboard and his bubble of denial begins to fade. How will our hero escape this attack? Find out in the next episode of Status Quo Warrior. I forgot to turn the reverb on there, sorry. Okay, I confess, let me get some water here. I confess, the Status Quo Warrior is a little cartoonish, not very nuanced. He is a superhero character after all. But as someone with privilege, I recognize some of the tools that Status Quo Warrior uses. I too wear rose-colored glasses. I have an impenetrable shield of denial. I'm familiar with what makes him tick. As someone with privilege, I have a status quo warrior within. Like our friend, I feel dissonance when I see injustice that doesn't affect me personally. I want change, but I also know deep down that change risks what I have. After all, I benefit from the status quo. And as any social psychologist will tell you, cognitive dissonance leads to discomfort. And when we're uncomfortable, our brain comes to the rescue using defense mechanisms and biases to protect us from that discomfort. In other circumstances, these defense mechanisms and biases get us through the day-to-day. They help us make quick decisions when we need to. They help us protect us from danger. But these happen when our brains are on autopilot, and we're also on autopilot most of the time. And so sometimes our mental shortcuts lead us to bad judgments, ones we don't always notice. So what is our brain protecting us from? In my view, it's protecting cherished beliefs. The first belief that we're protecting is that I'm a good person. And I need to pause here to let my cat out of the room so I need to be a good person here. Here you go. Go ahead. All right, rescued my cat here. All right, so the first belief we're protecting is that I'm a good person. As podcaster Kara Lowenthal puts it, when we feel defensive, we think it's because other people are wrong about us and unfair, but actually it's because we fear they're right and being fair in their assessment. If a white person gets challenged after saying something problematic, that stirs up fear. Am I a bad person, a racist? Think about the times you might have been called out. It's awkward, it's embarrassing. And so our inner status quo warrior goes to work. I'm not a racist, he says. Racists look like this guy. He goes to Klan rallies and burns crosses or wears Nazi regalia, not me. But his defensiveness is counterproductive. What's more productive is reframing what happened. Perhaps it was a situation where someone took the time and the uncomfortable effort themselves to point out a mistake you've made. Maybe it'll help to hear this from Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. If somebody says you did or said something racist, white people hear it as, you are a bad person, when it really means you are a white person who's unaware of race. Another unconscious belief we're trying to protect is that the world is just. Let me quote Rational Wiki. The just world hypothesis is the idea that all actions have predictable and just consequences. It implies, though sometimes subconsciously, a belief in some sort of universal force that ensures moral balance in the world in such a way that a person who exhibits good behavior will eventually be rewarded, while evil actions will ultimately be punished. You've heard variations of this before. What goes around comes around. Everything happens for a reason. You get what you deserve. Many people believe this implicitly, whether or not there's a magical being dispensing justice, or like a god, or the hidden hand of the market, or the secret, or, is it just an unexamined assumption? Like the fish in this cartoon. One on the left, there's no justice in the world. One in the middle, there's some justice in the world. And the big fish, the world is just. So the better off you are, the more you're inclined to see the world as just. And like with other cognitive biases, this belief helps us. It reduces dissonance. It reduces guilt. It gives us motivation to do better. But it hurts us too, especially when bad things happen to good people. Our status quo warrior loves to blame the victim. If we see a bad thing happen to someone unconsciously, it's tempting to look for ways that the good person wasn't so good after all. There's research that people, when they're able to contribute to a person that had something bad happen to them, they feel better about themselves, and so they feel better about that person. But if they are unable to help the person who was harmed, they blame the victim. So it's tempting to look for ways that person wasn't so good at all. He wasn't an angel. How can they be poor if they have cell phones or TVs or cars, or she was asking for it? Here's a great illustration of just world theory in action. So this is a person obviously down on his luck. I can't find a job and I'm out of money. Time to Google food stamps. For food stamps are for people who are genuinely poor. If you were poor, you wouldn't own a smartphone, would you? A week later, I sold my phone, but now I'm out of money again. So sell your car. No one who owns a car is poor. A month later, now I've got no money for food, no phone for job hunting, and no car to get a job. Excellent. Now you're genuinely poor. So now you're okay with me getting food stamps? Nope. And here's another one. Police officer asks, can you tell me what was stolen from your house, ma'am? My diamond earrings, our plasma TV. Policeman responds, ma'am, what makes you think you can own fancy things without having them stolen? In both of these cartoons, the person in power is more interested in making themselves comfortable than solving the underlying injustice. More recently, during this COVID crisis, I've seen landlords argue that renters who aren't able to make their rent should have prepared for something like this. It's their fault that they can't pay. But they don't apply that logic to themselves. Maybe I should have prepared for a global crisis where my tenants wouldn't be able to pay. So our status quo warrior resists when people protest their oppression. Those people are being shrill or they're being whiny. The way they're resisting it, protesting, is counterproductive. And since then, they deserve their fate. You're absolved from supporting their struggle. Nothing to see here. Move along. The flip side of victim blaming is hero worship. In a just world, People in power deserve their place in life. They worked hard for what they got. So if our hero turns out to do something villainous, they would deserve punishment, and that makes us uncomfortable. They might remember fondly all the laughs they had listening to Bill Cosby records, or watching Louis C.K. comedy specials, or Woody Allen movies, or J.K. Rowling books. But I like this person, our unconscious brains protest. No, their accusers must be the guilty ones. If the accused faces consequences for their action, blame it on overzealousness or lies or cancel culture. And because your hero has been unfairly maligned, you can feel justified, even righteous, for continuing to enjoy them. And so your dissonance is resolved. The status quo warrior also protects our biggest belief of all, that we're right in our beliefs. We do all kinds of things when our beliefs are challenged. When people make an argument that challenges us, we turn it into a straw man to make it easier to vanquish. As soon as you mention white privilege, you get these kinds of straw men. I checked my bank account this morning, they forgot to deposit my white privilege. Our status quo warrior jumps in. I'm not privileged, this guy in the Learjet is privileged. We also play word games. All lives matter, instead of trying to understand the basis of Black Lives Matter. Look at the gymnastics that people have around the term defund when it's applied to police. And we expect perfection from our opponents. If you can find an enemy, it's easy to make them personify the opposition and makes it easier to dismiss the opposition. So it's convenient, since no matter what side someone takes, you can always find a person doing it wrong. You can blame rioters and vandals instead of peaceful protests. I'm sorry, you can blame rioters and vandals and ignore peaceful protests. The Buddhists call this view clinging. It's an unhealthy form of grasping. It allows us to ignore beliefs we find inconvenient. Okay, so are we thoroughly bummed out now? Are you feeling doomed or defensive maybe? No need, it's, we're wired this way. We all do this. We may have different targets, but we do it. But there are ways out of this mess, and that's to notice when you're feeling defensive. And more importantly, notice what defense mechanisms arise to protect your ego. In that spirit, I'm going to borrow a meditation from a Buddhist magazine. So everyone, relax a little bit. It's not going to require anything physical. But think about a time when you were interacting with someone of another race. A time when the fact of racial difference became apparent to you somehow. What were some of the thoughts that ran through your mind? Were you uncomfortable? Were you cool with it? What notions of race do you recall being a part of this experience? What sensations arise in your body as you recall it? What emotions come up for you now? As an example, when I was young, I grew up in a predominantly white community, and so I had very little experience with anybody who was Black. And I befriended a neighbor, a Black neighbor who'd just come to the neighborhood, and he invited me over to his house. And trust me, I was young, so this is very embarrassing to admit, but I was surprised that he had a dog. Why I would have thought that Black families wouldn't own dogs just like white families would, that was a revelation to me. And even now I'm embarrassed at that assumption. As when I was still like 9, 8 years old, and I'm thinking, even then, why did I assume this? So, think about those moments and peer into what you were thinking at the time and how it made you feel. And that's a way of understanding how you respond to this discomfort. Now I want you to think of a word you might hear in discussions of social justice, like microaggressions. What does the word mean to you? Have you heard it? What feelings come up? Anything negative? Does it feel like a made up word or something that people just kind of throw at you? And my phone's ringing, but here's another one, white fragility. You know, what does, I'm sorry, this phone will stop ringing in a second. So white fragility, this is a term that gets people's hackles rising sometimes. Well, does that do the same to you? What does it mean? Have you heard it? It's good to think about all of these things. Like when you hear a new term, like a new pronoun that you didn't know for somebody who's not cisgender. The Buddhists had it right when they talked about the dangers of grasping, of being too attached. Attachment to them is one of the causes of suffering. And our status quo warrior is an expert at grasping. I hope it's obvious to you now that we are attached to the beliefs we have, much more than we realize. We see ourselves as objective, but our brains work overtime to protect us from discomfort. So it makes us not objective. This process often makes things worse and leads to greater discomfort. When alcoholics stand up and say, I'm so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic, it's a way of breaking free and removing all of the intellectual scaffolding they've built to maintain the facade, to end the mental gymnastics it takes to deny, to acknowledge your fear and dive right in. Think about how liberating it is to puncture your own denial, to be aware of our defense mechanisms as they work to protect our egos, and to see through those defense mechanisms. How do you feel yourself, do you feel yourself tempted to blame the victim of an injustice? Instead of succumbing to that urge, take it as an opportunity to investigate yourself. Why do I need to deny their suffering? Do they really deserve their fate, or am I just looking for a way out of doing something? There's a famous Zen quote, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. I'm not sure if I'm interpreting the Zen master properly, but it reminds me of an old Sonic Youth song, kill your idols. This is another meditation you can do, is don't hold your heroes, your ideas, or your ego hostage to your comfort. Think about some of your biggest heroes. Think about, somebody who's really very important to you, a musician or a writer or an actor or actress. Then imagine they've been accused of something terrible, something unforgivable. How would you respond? Be honest. I know I've experienced this a lot. Intellectual heroes, people in the atheist community, people I've known personally, musical heroes, comedy heroes. I was a massive fan of comedian Louis C.K. So the revelations that came out about him disturbed me deeply, but I found it was helpful to simply move on from him. Rather than seeing it as canceling, it was really an opportunity to uncancel other comedians. Especially comedians, who might have been his targets, to pay attention to stand-ups who I might have overlooked while I was focused elsewhere, like Tig Notaro or Hannah Gadsby. It's all a matter of reframing, being mindful of your mental processes. So to quote James Baldwin, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Katie. That was beautiful, and I can tell you firsthand it's a difficult song to learn, and she did that this week. So thank you very much. That was beautiful. And Michael, also thank you for both shaming me. I certainly resemble those remarks, and I will take them into my thought process and see if I can do better in the future. Thank you. Our closing words are from John Lewis in his last essay, published last week in the New York Times. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say, a way in. And then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy of and discipline of nonviolence. He said, "We are all complicit when we tolerate injustice." He said, "It is not enough to say it will get better by and by." He said, "Each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state, it is an act. And each generation must do its part to build what we call beloved community. A nation and a world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what he calls, good trouble, necessary trouble. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Let us read together the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now, please enjoy the musical postlude. Okay. We have a couple of announcements this week. The first being that Reverend Dawn is back from their summer hiatus. They will return to their regular schedule beginning Wednesday and will be available for pastoral care by appointment Wednesday through Friday. The other announcement is from Barbara. I don't know if you remember, I Know This Rose Will Open, and she had put together a beautiful montage of people's photos of their garden. Well, we're doing that again. This time the song is The Lone Wild Bird by Honey Whiskey Trio. You can hear a recording of this song by following the link in midweek announcements. For this project, Barbara would like you to, you guessed it, supply photos of birds. Despite the word lone, this is not a sad song. It speaks of peace that we may experience when we see that we as individuals are part of a larger natural world. The mystery of oneness is acknowledged without the need to analyze how it could be true. Please send your photos to music director Barbara Miller at uucsjsmusic@gmail.com. I can tell you from personal experience, I don't file my photos well, so I had a good time going through several years of photos looking for bird pictures, but I had a lot of fun looking at other old photographs too. So I highly recommend this exercise, especially if you're in quarantine. Jesse is going to post a list of other events that are taking place virtually at UCSJS. If you need to schedule or reschedule a meeting or event, please reach out to the administrator at uucsjsadmin@gmail.com to have the calendar altered. We had that this week where 2 meetings were scheduled Zoom-wise, and somebody had to find another Zoom room for themselves. You can see on there the Sunday worship. Tuesday is the Learning Lab for children and youth, and that's at 3 p.m. Thursday, Common Arts, and all makers and all ages welcome. Do we see? Oh, there it is. Still Singing, Wednesday, August 12th and 26th. Come exercise the vocal cords a little bit and have a little singing community is always nice. That's on Wednesday, middle and end of the month. Family Fun Game Night, the 2nd and 4th Fridays of each month. Buddhist Sangha. If you'd like some more meditation, that's the place to be. First, second, and third Tuesday at 6:30 and Saturday at 10 a.m. And Heartful Meditation Monday and Wednesday. So you can really meditate pretty much just about every day. And in these stressful times, it's not a bad idea to develop a strong practice of meditation. I do. We warmly welcome all of you who are visiting us today. Please stay and socialize in our online social time so we can get to know each other better. Now let us share in a moment of silent reflection to consider today's message and truly let the shame sink in that Michael's bestowed upon all of us and the meaning it has in our lives.